turn out fine. But you gotta keep your head up, oh, and you can let your head down, hey. You gotta keep your head up, oh, and you can let your head
Good evening and welcome to the Carolyn Holt Show. I'm so happy that you have joined me for tonight's show, and it's true, you gotta keep your head up. There's a lot of things that can make you hang your head, but you got to keep your head up because that's the only way that things will look a lot different for you if you keep your head up. On tonight's show, we're going to be talking to Mary Welch. Mary is the creator and founder of Trust Your Will, and she's going to be talking to us tonight about the importance of doing a will. And when I say that, I am talking to myself because I have not done a will. And Mary is so good at what she does. She knows how to hold your hand and hit you upside your head at the same time. So, because it's so important to put vehicles in place and our desires and our wishes. It's very important to not only make those desires and wishes known to others, but we can also be clear about what directives we want to leave behind. So wills are very important, and I think most of us know that, but for many people, there's a great fear factor in terms of doing a will because, you know, you have to think about the end of your life when you're no longer in control of anything, but you want to put some directives in place because if you don't, there are just numerous things that can happen if you don't say what your final wishes are. So I'd like to introduce Mary Welch of Trust Your Will. I'm sorry, not Test Your Will, Trust Your Will. Good evening, Mary, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Carolyn.
I'm so happy that you're here with me tonight because the work that you do is so important because it is hard to sit down and think about, what do I want to have happen when I'm no longer around. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about how you got started and what the passion was that drove you to actually decide to create a company.
Okay. First, I'd like to thank you for having me here. Well, and I would like to send our prayers out to the people from Las Vegas that lost loved ones and the ones that have been injured. I would like to, our family, our heart goes out to each and every one of them. On how I got started. Well, because because personally I've experienced the losses of two family members close to me. Okay. One was my brother. He passed away. He had a brain aneurysm, and he passed away from that in November of 2015. And then 90 days later, our mother passed away of breast cancer. Wow. My brother was 52. And 52. Without a doubt, no one expected anything like this. It wasn't that he planned it or any of us could have ever foreseen it. But he didn't have a will. Okay. He had nothing in place. Wasn't even, to be honest with you, as a family, we hadn't even talked about it. So it wasn't. He was single at the time. So it was himself, and he had a daughter. Okay. He has a daughter, my niece, but he didn't have a wife. So that could be why there wasn't a conversation. Maybe because he was single.
Okay.
So
that's possible.
But my mother, she actually had prepared everything 30 years earlier. So she was really prepared. So, 30 years earlier, she had a will filled out. It was all complete. And it was without, it gave us direction. It's what she wanted, and all of her wishes could be carried out. The difference is phenomenal. I would tell anyone, even if and some people don't know this, even if you just sit down, you can, and if you're in the state of California, I'll say I can only speak for California.
Okay.
And I will also say, too, this is educational. I'm not an attorney, so this is all educational for anyone. But In the state of California, you can write a will in your own handwriting. Mm-hmm. You can sit down, take a sheet of paper, write your wishes, sign it, and it is totally acceptable.
It's legal.
It is legal. Mm-hmm. The only thing is I wouldn't advise it because some people may. No, I'm not saying you can't do it, but I would say anything you do of that magnitude, you want an attorney to see it. You don't want to just do this and willy-nilly hope it works. So I would advise anyone, if you're going to something of this magnitude, let an attorney look it over.
Guide you.
Exactly.
Yes.
Through it.
Because some of the legal jargon is really going to come into play if there is somebody to contest it.
Correct.
If there is somebody who just absolutely want to ignore it.
Yes.
Because then it forces somebody else to have to carry out the actual wishes of the deceased.
Correct.
So not only an attorney, but just anybody that has legal authority, because the unfortunate thing is many times when family members die,
correct,
you get to see another side of family members that are living.
That's correct.
And so if you don't want to find yourself in a battle,
yes,
then if you have the directive and you have a will before
right.
You pass, then it makes life a lot easier for the living, and hopefully you can rest in peace.
This is true. I really call it, truthfully, I call it a gift.
Okay.
I really think that when you sit down and you write the will, you're leaving a legacy and you're leaving a gift to your family. You're saying, these are my wishes. I've worked my whole life, and this is what I have to give to you or to leave to you.
Yes.
But if you don't say anything, you're really saying to your family, not that, I'm going to be honest, you're really saying you don't care what happens to it. And then this is why you hear, and I think we've all heard of these instances where families fight. And they say, Grandma left this to me, and Grandpa told me I can have this, and those kind of things, because there was nothing in writing to dispute it. And so family members will fight. And unfortunately, this has, broken families up. And because of, it may not even be anything that significant, but it's just the fact that it wasn't spelled out. And I would really caution anyone, too. When you write a will, to be honest with you, no one has to see it until you pass away. It's not something you show people. It is a private thing that you're doing. It's not something that's public. So you can have it in a safe deposit box, which is, you just make sure that someone has a key, but they wouldn't have access to it until you pass away. So it would say it'll be what's called a pay upon death or a beneficiary. Unless they bring a death certificate, they can't get in there.
Oh, okay. So the key is not held in any family or business. It would be held like through the bank or whomever you might have your safe deposit box with, or whatever it is that you use for safekeeping. The key is held by that entity, not family members or not people that you wouldn't want to know in advance.
A family member, well, I'll be honest, unless they can be listed as a beneficiary.
Okay.
So if they're not a beneficiary, they can't get into the account. And only way a beneficiary can get into an account is with a death certificate. So if there's no death certificate, they can't get in anyway.
Oh, okay, but so let's say then that you pass away, you have a beneficiary in place, and you didn't put the key where it should be.
Right.
Then what is the procedure for being able to access
that account?
Yes.
If it's a savings or a checking account, if there's no beneficiary listed, you have to wait 30 days.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've heard of instances where people had to wait to bury people because they were waiting that 30 days to get into the bank account in order to get the money to bury the person.
Oh, okay.
So that's what it's a waiting period, and it's a month. Or, but if it's having, as far as a safe deposit box, sometimes people give the key to an attorney. and they have it and they just tell the person, if I pass away, go see this attorney, and they have my will, they have access to everything, that kind of thing. So it's all, and it depends on your estate. Some people have large estates. Some people, and I can tell you for a fact, there's no way to know. There's no way by looking at a person to determine what their finances are or what kind of money they have. But the key is that someone needs to know that they can, that they have a will, or that you have something in writing. Otherwise, you'll die, as many people know, intestate, which means you have no will, and that leads to arguing and fighting and everything. But if there is something in place, at least remember too, even if you have a will, you still have to go to probate, which is called, another way I'll say is called court. It goes before a judge. And a judge has determined the validity of that will. That will is not, doesn't even become, it's a will, but until that judge says, yes, it is a valid will, it is not valid until the judge actually affirms it.
Okay. Well, but the problem still exists, though, with access if you had a key and you didn't leave it with anybody. So is that still under the 30-day rule that whatever account you may have had, no one can... so what do they do, like break the lock or... Well,
and I can't speak for what they'll do with a safe deposit box. I know what they do with savings and checking. And for a bank or credit union, I know for a fact it's a 30-day on that. Okay. And so what is the process then for if the key can't be found? That I don't have the answer to that, so I don't want to try and give you an answer. I don't. No,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but so I would have to get that for you as to what they would do.
Yeah, because I know sometimes people are well intended, but anything they could have
lost the key.
Yeah, just any kind of life situation could present itself. And for whatever reason, no one ended up with the key.
Right.
Then what do you do? Now, I know, as you said, the death certificate is a major document that comes into play, but still we need to gain access in some way. So
I don't know. I guess I don't. That I couldn't answer, but I will definitely find the answer for you for that.
Oh, okay. Well, people may have questions, and if you do, you can feel free to call us at area code 323-293-3375. Again, that's area code 323-293-3375, because we're talking to Mary Welch, and Mary is the creator and founder of a company called Trust Your Will. She has a website. It's trustyourwill.com. And in the near future, she's going to be setting up webinars on her website so that she can help to guide you through the process and clarify any concerns or questions, because many times, I know I am a person, I have a lot of questions, and that's probably why I have not done my will, but I'm going to change that, because I do understand that it is very necessary to have something in place, and especially in my situation, because I have a child. So, it's very important that he knows exactly what's to happen regarding my situation. But you were talking earlier when you said if you don't have a will, it's called intestate. Yes. And if you don't mind, can you talk just a little bit about testate and then probate? Because these are not words people hear
every
day. And so while we may think that we understand what they are, we want to offer some clarity about testate and probate.
Probate is I was speaking on before. It is what it really means is that your will has to go. Well, it will go before a judge, and a judge will say yes. I'll use myself as an example. I have a will that's completed, and I pass away. Then go to, if I only have a will, if I didn't have a living trust, and I'll talk about that briefly too. But the will would go before a judge, and the judge would say, yes, this will is valid. So that what that really says is everything that I've stated in that will is to happen. Okay. So the person that I say is the executor is the person that's going to carry out my wishes and oversee everything. Yes. That person is to be compensated for being in that position, which is really a daunting task, because what they're really doing, many of you have ever seen an estate sale? Okay, that means that person's, those items are being liquidated or sold, and then that money goes into that person's estate, and then it's divided amongst the family, if there is family. Okay. If there's no family, then it still can be an estate sale, but now the money goes to the state of California. And all of that we're going to talk about. We're going to go to break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about what happens when you pass away. You don't have a will and you don't have heirs. So stay with me. We'll be right back. Right.
Mastering math can be big fun. Fun for you and everyone. Play it each and every day. Master math the easy way. Sing, play it, Math Maze.
Why not turn math time into fun time with Math Maze, the new game craze? Get yours today at mathmaze.us.
Mom, now you can help your son master math and have big fun. Play it each and every day. Master math the easy way. Sing, play it.
Make sure your child owns the skills necessary for success in high school algebra. Get it now. Mathmaze.us. Mathmaze.us.
And now you can help your daughter play it like you know you oughta. Play it each and every day. Master math the easy way. Say it, play it. Math Maze.
Math Maze cards contain both Spanish and English. Get yours today at mathmaze.us. That's mathmaze.us.
Thank you so much for joining me tonight. This is the Carolyn Holt Show, and I have as my special guest Mary Welch of Trust Your Will. And Mary and I were talking about wills and the importance of having a will. And when we went to break, we were talking about testate and probate, and she was giving explanation about that because, as I stated, we don't hear these words every day. So she was given some clarification, and she mentioned that testate is when you pass away and you don't have a will.
Correct.
And probate is when you go to court to validate
correct
the will that you've left. Now, what would you say would be some of the reasons that the will would be invalid once you get to
court
probate?
Okay. Well,
what would invalidate a will?
You can have anyone to come and say that the person that signed the will was not of a right mind, or that someone coerced them to sign the will, or that it could be all kinds of literally, when I say any kind of reason, you can. Because anyone can contest the will. That's what people don't realize. It's not just the family members. Anyone can come to court on the day, if you're in court to validate, and say that they contest it. And they may have a valid argument. Maybe they have another will. You never know what people, I hate to say, come up with. But it can be anything.
No, that's why we're talking about it, because we know that people do come up with
anything.
Now, it's my understanding that there are people. I remember Frank Sinatra, when he passed away, he had some kind of legal vehicle in place that said that if the will was contested, then nobody would receive anything. So is that I guess a common occurrence, would you say, or because he was a celebrity he may have taken the step to do that. But it just in
general?
In general.
Well, it's the wills I've seen, and not that I've seen that many, but the ones I have seen, they do have a clause in there that if the person contesting it was to benefit, they are no longer to benefit from the will. So if anyone that was a beneficiary contests the will, then they wouldn't benefit. But I've also seen it, like you said, if there's anybody that contests at all, then nobody benefits. And the only thing about that is really penalizing people that should benefit from it. So the ones I've seen is just that the person, if you're a contester, you won't get anything for contesting it. So it really says to the person, if you're going to drag this on, then you're not going to get anything for that. Wow. That's what it means. So.
I think that's terrible. You're going through enough with the person being deceased, and then to have this added. You also mentioned, we're going to leave wills just for a second. We're going to come back. But you mentioned living trust.
I did.
Now, tell us about a living trust and what a living trust is designed to do that's different from what the will does.
Living trust is, I would tell you, number one, you must have an attorney to do a living trust. And that is a huge difference. An individual person can do their own will without an attorney.
Okay.
You don't need. So let me go through. There's 3 types of wills.
All
one
right.
is called holographic, which is the one I first mentioned, when you can write your own will by hand. As long as there's nothing on that paper that's typed or crossed out or changed or anything like that, and you sign it, that's acceptable. Now, that's the holographic will. The second type of will is a statutory will. That's when you get the will from like the LegalZoom or anything online, and you complete fill in the squares or fill in the boxes. That's totally acceptable also. That must be witnessed by 2 people who do not benefit from the will. So the 2 witnesses cannot also be beneficiaries.
Oh, okay.
That's
now, why
is
is that? Why can't witnesses, I mean, if you want to leave them something, why can't they benefit? What is it just to make it all
legal, I think? I think it's because then it doesn't look like you force that person to leave you something. They wanted a neutral person to. And so now also some people do this. They have it witnessed and then it's notarized. The 2 witnesses have to be at the same time, by the way.
Okay, now this is in the living trust.
No, we're still talking about this is a statutory will.
Okay.
They have to, the 2 witnesses have to witness at the same time, and then some people also have it notarized.
Wow.
And that is totally legal and totally acceptable to do that. And then the last type of will would be one written by an attorney. Okay. And that's, of course, that would be acceptable also. Now, a living trust is when you predominantly, I would tell you, if you have property and you want it to go to someone and you don't want it to go to probate, which is if it does go to probate, you end up having to pay attorney fees. You can lose the value of the property, and usually the property has to be sold. But if you want the property to go to someone, I advise a living trust.
Okay. Because
then you do not have to go to court necessarily to verify it. It is actually I don't know if you've ever seen on some people on their bank account, on their checks, it says the trust of so-and-so. And so when you see that, that means that anything, and that person is usually the person that's over a trust is the person. For instance, if I have a trust in my name, then I would be the trust of Mary Welch.
Okay.
And so while I'm living, I manage that trust. And then when I pass away, it has all my instructions already in the trust. It says who is to get what property or what is to happen, but you don't have to go to court for those things to happen.
Oh, okay. So but if somebody in the family creates an issue with it, then you have to go.
You may have to go then. True.
Okay. But the whole point is so that you
don't have to go. Exactly.
Yes.
And so that you can transfer property without having to go to court. But also, I'll be honest, in a trust you also have a medical directive. You have it's so much more in that trust than just the trust. It's very intense. If you ever have seen a trust, you usually come in like a case, and it's a very strong legal document. But it's read. If you ever were incapacitated, there's papers in there to take care of that. Just a lot.
Well, when I was talking to you about tonight's show, we talked about the fear factor.
Right.
And the fear factor is probably the main reason that people don't do what they need to regarding giving directives after they pass. So what would your recommendation be to get over the fear and get it done? What do you offer in terms of consulting with people to kind of take the fear away and know that what you're offering up is in their best interest, and it's okay to go ahead and take that step,
that leap?
Yes.
This is what I've heard. I've had people tell me, well, I don't want to write a will because if I write a will, I may die. And the first thing I've said is, you're going to die, okay? Let me let you know that
unless
now.
Unless they are the last people here or something.
No, but I've actually heard people say that I don't want to do it because then I'm inviting death or something. No, that's not the case. As I said at the beginning, it is a gift. And I'm not saying it's easy, but unfortunately, I've had to deal with death in my life, so I see the reality of it, and I see the necessity of it, and I think, truthfully, I think I was afraid of it, afraid to write a will and do all those things. But at a young age, my husband passed away suddenly, and I was a 35-year-old widow with 3 young children, and that made me face a reality that I did not want to face, and it was my own mortality. And I just said, you have to do this because if something happens to you, what would happen? Your children are, whose family would they go to if you don't put it in writing? Do they go to your late husband's family? Do they go to your family? And that made me, within a month, to be honest with you, I did everything. I sat down and just did it and it was fear, but it forced me to do something instead of not do something. I did the opposite. I made me go in and put it in writing. I want my children to go to my mom and those kind of things. And here are my bank accounts, and these are the numbers and all the things that I didn't want to face, but I did it.
Yeah, well, and that's the key factor is being comfortable doing something that you don't want to do.
Right.
Now, in consulting with people, is there a besides helping them to understand that this is a gift, is there a particular process that you share with them that you've noticed does help to put the fear factor at bay, where they're not just thinking about how scared they are, but how important
this is. I think what I try to remind people or show them, do you know of instances where you've seen this happen and people didn't have things in order? And all of us know.
Yes.
And I would tell you, and I kind of remind them of that. And then one of my friends, and I hope she's watching now, her name is Linda Webb, and she said to make sure to remind people too that they need to have a pre-need. That's another thing that they may want to, and these are all things that, especially as you get older, you face, because the reality every day we know that no day is promised, but the reality that we are all going to, we're going to leave at one point, and so the goal is to leave, and I think the best way I could say it, in a good way, in a way that the entire family stays intact, the leave in a way that it makes it easy on family members instead of hard on family members. And that's what I think. When I think of instances where people have passed away, some people knew they were going and still did nothing. And some people die suddenly. So, but when the person, this is what I've noticed too, when a person has done everything and it's in order, it's like the family breathes easy. They're saying, oh, they wrote it all down. And some people have even given family members copies. And so there was no question about what their wishes were.
Exactly.
I can't say
And I think I would probably be one of those. Because I don't see, once I get it done, I don't see the importance of keeping it a big, I know people do. And we're going to talk about that as well. But I personally don't see, but a lot of people are skeptical,
right?
And they've had bad experiences where they couldn't trust people.
Right.
But I think that's the biggest thing that's the biggest gift is trust,
right.
Because once trust enters the picture, then fear can subside. So I think it's very necessary, because I think what people don't understand is that if you don't have a will, I always say this, if you don't have a will, and like I said, I am talking to myself, what you do have ends up in the hands of the state in which you live.
Well, no, not quite, though. It depends. If you have family members, then there's a successor.
That's what I'm saying, without heirs.
Correct.
If you pass away, I'm sorry, if you pass away without heirs,
correct.
The state in which you live
correct.
can take your estate and do with it whatever they wish. Now, a lot of people say, well, I'm gone. I don't care about that. But I think that the whole point of being on the face of the earth is to have connections, to bond, to build relationships with people, even if it's not your own family, because some people say that they get along better with friends and colleagues, better than they do with their families. And so if that is the case, you need to make your wishes known, even to your friends and your family. And now I would say this, it has been my experience that a lot of families do struggle because if family members you thought may have loved you and they couldn't get along without you, you see a different side of them. When a person passes away, and it is very important to have something in place to hold them at bay, because it's almost as if they lose their mind. So could you talk a little bit about being okay with, say that you're the administrator or the executor or whatever, being okay with carrying out the wishes of a person if you're left to administrate or be the executor of the estate, kind of what that entails, so that people will know that,
what it means to do that. Just so happens I am the executor of an estate.
Oh, okay.
It is a big responsibility. It is a big responsibility because I think the key in that position is fairness. You want to be fair with everyone involved, and you want to do everything the person has asked you to do in that will. You want to, if that means you have to sell property or that whatever the case may be. It could be distribute money from accounts. It can be any of those things. But whatever it is, you have. This is what I always say about being an executor. I have to sleep at night. I have to sleep at night. So I have to make sure everything I'm doing is above, like you say, above board. I'm not trying to do anything that I won't be able to sleep at night for. That kind of thing. So, but it is not an easy position to be in. I tell you, I've never been in the position before as executor, so this is my first time doing that. And but it's been interesting, and we'll see. We're still going through the process, so it's not over yet.
Well, I was going to say, if you don't mind, can you speak just a little bit in terms of the process that you're currently going through? Because whose estate is this that we are dealing with?
My mother's estate.
Okay. So in terms of handling your mom's affairs, and as you said, she wrote her will 30 years ago.
Right, but it was a typed will, so it was.
So what is that? What's the proper legal name if it's typed?
Statutory.
Statutory,
so
okay.
Hers was a statutory will. It wasn't, the holographic is when you write it by hand. So hers was statutory will, was typed within and it was witnessed by two people, and so it was perfectly legal and everything. But it was interesting. I knew I was the executor, but I hadn't seen the will. I guess that's the best way to describe that. So when I saw it and my sisters and I went through it and had to go to court and get it validated. They had to agree that that was my mother's signature, so which they did. And but they could have said no. They could have said it wasn't, but it was, and we all knew it was. You know, so it still is. But even with that, it's still a process. We still have to take time to sell property, things that I didn't think we'd have to do. But this is where we are. We just do what we can do and get through the process. But it's not easy. I would tell anybody. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but it has to be done.
Yes.
And someone has to see it through. And we are working with an attorney. It's a probate attorney. So I would tell, we just take it one step at a time. That's what we do. We take it one step at a time.
Well, you know, I would say, almost a year ago, when Prince passed away, and being a celebrity, you know, it's really, I guess, not an expectation that perhaps there would be no will in place, but apparently he did not have a will. So talk a little bit about what happens, especially in a situation like Prince. I guess in his situation, what it's called the succession law, because he was not married.
Correct. And no children. So talk a little bit about how that all unfolds when you're a famous person, right?
And
you pass away without,
and you don't have a will. Yes.
It was. I actually spoke to someone who knew, I guess, that knew Prince, and they were telling me about that. He did that intentionally. I don't know why, but he didn't. Because with all the attorneys that he had been working with, it was almost really hard to believe that he didn't have a will. But he, for whatever the reason, did not. The succession would be, normally it would automatically go to a wife. Then it would be children. It would also be, look for parents, any parents that are living. Then it would go to any of his siblings, which it has. I think it's his sister. I don't know if it's more than one sibling or not.
I think so. I think he had several
siblings, and so it'll go down. And then let's say that he didn't have any living sisters. Then it would actually go to the nieces and nephews. It's all been, the courts have figured all this out. They're looking for heirs. It's not like they don't want the heirs. They want the heirs to get whatever it is. And as you probably know, in the state of California, you can go to the website and find out if you have, and put your name in on when they're looking for, even now, heirs of anybody's estate or anything that you may be owed to you from the state of California. And you can do it 24 hours a day if there's something that you think someone may have left to you or anything like that. So they're always looking to make sure, before, they don't just want your money, but you have to prove that you are related to that person. But the succession that's the way it goes. Automatically, it's to the wife, and then it goes to the children, then it goes to the parents, then it goes to siblings, then it goes to nieces and nephews. It can go all the way down to grandchildren if they have to, if they can find heirs to that person.
Now, what about in situations of foster children or adopted children? Is that more of a legal matter that needs to be addressed, or is it already set up and it's kind of automatic as well? Any adopted child is a child to that family. When you adopt a child, they are part of the family. It's just as if they were born into the family. Okay.
So they get the same benefits as another child. Now, foster care is different. That's different. They have not, unless they've gone through the adoption process, then they probably would not, and I'm saying probably, would not be an heir to that estate. But adoption, you're just as if you're born. Which makes sense. But I said, the unfortunate thing is if for some reason things are not in order, it can always turn into a mess. And we both said a mess. Yeah, and that's what you are about trying to prevent. Is a mess. Somebody I know. I don't know who the somebody is. I've spoken on it was just on a conference call, and there were 10 people on the call. 8 people on the call did not have a will. And they all, which they said after that call, they were going to at least sit down and write one. At least do that. But it was so interesting. They all said the same thing. It's been on my mind. I just haven't sat down to do it. And now that I reminded them that, how important it is. And one lady was raising her grandkids. And she said, I know I need to do this. I don't know why I haven't done it. So it really tells me that it's in the back of our heads, we need to do it. But it's not something we want to face. Like you said, I don't know if it's fear, probably a lot of it fear, but we just don't want to deal with it. And but it is so much better. It's like I think it's a release, and you just feel better once it's done, and you can feel better about what would happen. And of course, we don't want anything to happen. None of us do. But if it were to, now you've done all you can do to make sure that your family is secure, and these are your wishes. And I'm going to revert back to one of your questions. The reason people don't show their will to other people because they don't want to know what their reaction is going to be.
Really?
Everybody, like you said, you have one son, correct?
Yes.
Imagine if you had 10 sons.
Okay.
Now,
I would be curious of what my 10 sons, I would be curious as to what their reaction is because, as you said, if we're dealing with a will from the standpoint of it being a gift.
Correct.
I would say that. Well, sons, listen, I've decided to, and maybe that's could be part of the framing, is that I've decided to get my gift together.
Right.
Because I really do think, this is just my own personal opinion, that giving people and letting them know things while I'm living it's okay with me, because I do hope that they are happy. But if they're not, I want to know that too.
Well,
but I know most people are not like me, and they wouldn't dare.
No, they're not.
As I shared with you, I know somebody that had like a $40 million estate, and the dad passed away, and they are still working on resolving matters with that estate, because he may have had a will. But if he did, they don't know where it is. And so there's just all of these things. But the kids were not clear as to what or if had been left to them. And so I think even if Dad felt that he shouldn't share, he didn't want to tell all the details. I think he should have said something.
Yeah.
Because it leaves it in a big mess. And in this particular situation, the older children decided they didn't want to deal with it, period. And so they kind of left it to one of the younger kids to work all the kinks out. And maybe if there's something in there for them in the end, maybe they'll get involved. But that's kind of a haphazard approach. So when you are meeting with clients, how do you take that part of the out of the process, that haphazardness? What do you kind of tell them to say? Now, listen, this is a far better thing to do than this, whatever this is.
That don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of it. And it sounds like that gentleman was. Because,
I think so.
To have a $40 million estate and not write a will is really, it's almost crushing to the family that you would be, it's being inconsiderate of them. I don't know if the wife had passed away prior to.
A long ago.
Okay. So it's really being inconsiderate to the kids to not say where everything is and if you can manage that, I'm assuming you can manage a will. So it wouldn't have taken a lot for him to do it. I don't know why the gentleman didn't do it, but it's still, like you said, I think you told me it's been 12 years they've been working through this. So all this time, they could have been doing other things with their life. So.
And maybe that was the whole purpose. Sometimes people have it in their heart. They want to make life miserable for
other people.
And so maybe that was part of it. I don't know.
Right.
But I know that that's and I guess that's my point about it being so necessary, because just suppose that he had passed away, there were no heirs, and there's, again, my pet peeve, the state ends up with this huge estate, and when he could have helped not only his family, right, but friends or whomever, or and that's another thing they talk about is charitable giving and all of that. And so we're going to go to break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about that, how you incorporate that into the will. Stay with me.
Mastering math can be big fun for you and everyone. Play it each and every day. Master math the easy way. Say it, play it, Math Maze.
Why not turn math time into fun time with Math Maze, the new game craze? Get yours today at mathmaze.us.
Mom, now you can help your son master math and have big fun. Play it each and every day. Master math the easy way. Say it, play it. Math Maze.
Make sure your child owns the skills necessary for success in high school algebra. Get it now. Mathmaze.us. Mathmaze.us.
Dad, now you can help your daughter play it like you know you oughta. Play it each and every day. Master math the easy way. Say it, play it. Math Maze.
Math Maze cards contain both Spanish and English. Get yours today at mathmaze.us. That's mathmaze.us.
Thank you so much for joining me tonight for the Carolyn Holt Show. I have as my guest Mary Welch of Trust Your Will, and Mary is the creator and founder of Trust Your Will, and a person that you might want to reach out to, especially if you're like I am. You have not planned or sat down and done that for you and for your family. Definitely you can reach out to her at trustyourwill.com, and she'll walk you through some of the particulars of setting up a will so that things can go smoothly at the end of your life. Now, Mary, when we went to break, we were talking about leaving things to foundations and corporations and pets and all of that. I was talking to you about Leona Helmsley, and she had a huge estate that she left to her dog.
Right.
And I was saying, I just can't understand why that would be. And I'm not making light of people owning pets, because I know that most people feel that pets are equally important to as family members, and that's what they consider them as family members.
Right.
And we were talking about that the caretaker, basically because a pet can't talk and discuss what its needs are, there's a caretaker that's left in charge.
Right.
And then the question became, well, what if something happens to the caretaker? Would the caretaker have the right to leave the estate if the dog passed away to a person? Or is that simply a legal matter at that point?
I would think that there would have to be something. If she left it to the pet, there has to be something in writing as to what would happen when the pet passes away, which probably went, this is an assumption, to some type of charity for pets. And
because there's no succession law in these states to cover pets that I could find.
No,
there is nothing.
I've never heard of one.
Yeah, but now that's not to say that one won't be created. But also, you remember, what is it, Anna Nicole Smith, and in her situation where she had a child, and there was a question as to who the father was, I guess, and all of these people took paternity tests, and so it turned out that the biological dad was a certain person who is unmarried. So how would that be handled? Because they were not married,
right? But
he is the child's father.
And if I remember correctly, I think he's the guardian. So that means he's going to be over all whatever was in the estate. If I remember correctly, I think he is the guardian of the daughter, which means that he has to make sure that all of her needs are met.
So he doesn't just get to be dad. He there's a particular title for him is guardian.
And I don't quote me, but if I remember.
But no, that makes sense. I mean, since they were not married,
right?
Being the guardian would make sense. But it's so many. I guess so many details to think about. So share with the audience just a little bit in terms of how you see the details and what your recommendations are in terms of how they work those details.
Well, I would definitely recommend for those of you that are, and some people, I'm hoping that someone is actually sitting down writing the will now, but one thing you might want to add too is a letter to your children or husband that can be attached to the will. And the reason why you would do that is because at that time, seeing anything that you write to them is precious. And it's like leaving, is saying, this is how much I love you, and I remember when we went fishing, or I remember just anything and everything. It means more than what you could even imagine. I have letters from my mom, and I've read them over and over. But they mean so much, and she didn't leave a letter with the will, but these are just letters, through life that she's written me. And now that she's not here, it's just every little thing means everything. So I would tell anybody, having a letter attached to your will addressed to your loved ones, it's just monumental. So that's something you might want to, and you could incorporate if you like to. And like you said, people do leave. You can leave estates to foundations. People do that. Churches. People have churches that they leave. It can be homes. It can be cars. It can be, you name it. Anything you want to leave to a nonprofit. Also, too, estates aren't taxed up to $5 million, I believe it is. So, then just recently, I think that's what's being on the table is estate tax. It's just something that's just come out recently as right now with our administration, but up to, I think it's $5.5 million. So when you are transferring those estates, if it's less than that, then and as I said before, don't quote me on these figures or anything like that, but you would not have to pay estate tax. So it's just depends on what the value of the estate is, whether you have to pay that or not. So these are little things that can come to play. You may not think they matter, but they can matter. As you said, with the gentleman with the $40 million estate, they will be paying estate tax on that $40 million. So there will be on.
Now, when you say they, now who? Just the administrator or the executor, or people who were heirs? The
heirs. There'll be a
whatever
amount.
Their amount is.
Now, based on over $5.5 million, there's already a scale it's already been figured out and everything.
Oh, it's predetermined.
Correct. On what they will have. Well, the estate pays, not the person. The estate is going to pay the state of California so much after $5.5 million.
Oh,
that goes
a percent.
Correct.
A percentage.
It's already been predetermined. Like you said. So that's for anyone. It doesn't matter who you are. So, but less than that amount, then no. You have if there's fees, but the fees are minuscule in compared to what you would be paying, that kind of thing. So but there's attorney fees attached to all of this. But the attorney fees are predetermined also, by the way. They're determined by the state of California what they are.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to say what they are because I can't remember the exact amount off the top of my head, but I think it's less than $10,000 though on the probate attorney fee. So that's already predetermined. So there's some things that the state has already determined that you don't have to figure out. They've already done it all for you. Okay. And every estate is different. Some can go fast and some can go slow. Depends on what the person has. If, for instance, let's say you have property, but the property isn't paid for. And that could be, and so now you have the person passed away and they still have a mortgage on the property. So that can come into play. So every single one is different. There are no two alike. Okay. Just like we have no two people alike, there are no two estates alike.
Yes.
But the laws are already in place as to how you to move through this.
Okay. Now, briefly, we have about 3 minutes. You were talking about pre-need.
I did mention pre-need.
Yes. So if you can talk a little bit about that before we wrap up the show, I would appreciate that. What is that? What is pre-need?
It would be you can pay for your funeral, you can pay for your plot where you be buried, or you can pay for the urn. All of this can be paid for before you even pass away. You can and people do. And you can go to any cemetery now and pick the plot where you would like to be your final resting place and start making payments on it. And it's already paid for. So when you pass away, it's not a burden on the family on where to bury you. And if many of you are not aware, a funeral is very expensive.
Yes, it is.
We're talking anywhere and I know some between $10,000 for just to bury someone. So, and that may or may not include the plot. So the funeral itself and the plot are two separate things. Not to mention the arrangements and everything else. So I'm just saying, it can be a very costly endeavor. So that's why I notice a lot of people are going to cremation.
Yes. Now the other question though about pre-need, what if it's not completely paid for? That the person, they started the process,
right,
but they didn't finish. Do you know how that is handled?
Someone would probably have to finish paying for it, and that would mean it could be either from that person that passed away's bank account, or someone else would step in and pay for it, or life insurance. And I didn't even go through having beneficiaries on life insurance policies.
You can talk about that a little bit. Yes,
okay, if you have beneficiaries on life insurance policies and you have a will and you name that person, the life insurance policy precedes that, meaning that it's in first position. Whoever's name is on that life insurance policy, it doesn't matter what the will says if the company goes by the beneficiary on the policy. That's really important because people may say, well, I'm leaving a policy, I'm leaving money to so-and-so, but the name on the policy, let's say I'm using me as an example, I'm leaving money to my son. Okay. But on the life insurance, I say in the will, I say I'm leaving money to him, but on the life insurance policy, it says my husband's name. The policy will go to my husband, no matter what the will says. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay, I'm going to go slow because I said that kind of fast. Okay, really quickly. If you have a life insurance policy, whoever the beneficiary is on that life insurance policy is in first position. Okay. That also goes for whoever's the beneficiary on your 401k, whoever's the beneficiary on your bank accounts. No matter what the will says, whoever the beneficiary is on those accounts, that's who will receive the funds in those accounts.
Okay, but then they can do what they want to with those funds.
Exactly
so
right.
They don't have to meet any burial expenses with it. They can essentially the funds are theirs to do with as they so
please. Now you can designate in the will there to do something with it, but to be honest with you, when you're leaving money to people, they can be sure to leave it to someone you trust.
Okay.
That's the best way I can answer that because you legally, they don't have to do anything with it.
That's where we're going to leave it.
Okay.
That they don't have to do anything. So make sure that you have your wishes in writing, and if they're beneficiaries, then you need to leave them some instructions as well.
Correct.
Otherwise, it is theirs to do with what they want. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight. As always, on this show, the goal is to help to move you from misery to magnificence and from subpar to spectacular. Thank you so much for joining me, and good night, everybody.
Mastering math can be big fun. Fun for you and everyone. Play it each and every day. Master math the easy way. Say it, play it. Math Maze.
Why not turn math time into fun time with Math Maze, the new game craze? Get yours today at mathmaze.us.
Mom, now you can help your son master math and have big fun. Play it each and every day. Master math the easy way. Say it, play it. Math Maze.
Make sure your child owns the skills necessary for success in high school algebra. Get it now. Mathmaze.us. Mathmaze.us.
Dad, now you can help your daughter play it like you know you oughta. Play it each and every day. Master math the easy way. Say it, play it. Math Maze.
Math Maze cards contain both Spanish and English. Get yours today at mathmaze.us. That's mathmaze.us.
So will the real men get up? I know you're fed up, ladies, but keep your head up.